I'd like to go ahead and introduce this evening's readers. Jeff Chang is the Vice President of Narrative Arts and Culture at Race Forward. His books include Can't Stop, Won't Stop, A History of the Hip Hop Generation, Total Chaos, The Art and Aesthetics of Hip Hop, and Who We Be, A Cultural History of Race in Post-Civil Rights America. His latest, We Gonna Be All Right, Notes on Race and Resegregation, was named the Northern California Nonfiction Book of the Year, and the Washington Post declared it the smartest book of the year. In May 2019, he and director Bao Win created a 4-episode digital series adaptation of the book for PBS Indie Lens Storycast. He is featured in the PBS documentary Asian Americans. Recently, he helped to write The Cultural New Deal alongside a number of artists and cultural bearers. A national leader in narrative and cultural strategy, Jeff co-founded Culture Strike and Color Lines. He was named by the Utne Reader as one of 50 visionaries who are changing the world, and by KQED as an Asian Pacific American local hero, which he is. He has been a USA Ford Fellow in Literature and the winner of the Asian American Literary Award. He was recently named to the Frederick Douglass 200. His next project is a biography of Bruce Lee. Please welcome Jeff Chang.
Thanks so much, Car.
And a brief bio for Shannon here as well. Shannon Lee is the CEO and owner of the Bruce Lee Family Companies and chairperson of the Bruce Lee Foundation, as well as the daughter of the legendary martial artist and cultural icon Bruce Lee. Shannon's mission is to provide access to her father's philosophy and life through education and entertainment. She's the creator of Camp Bruce Lee through the Bruce Lee Foundation and has spoken at TED, TEDx, Creative Mornings, and elsewhere. Shannon lives in California with her daughter Ren, where she co-hosts the Bruce Lee podcast and executive produces Cinemax's Warrior. We're here celebrating her book, Be Water, My Friend, The Teachings of Bruce Lee. Please join me in welcoming Shannon Lee.
Hi, thank you, Car.
And I guess this is where we take it away, yeah?
I guess this is it, yeah. All right.
Shout out. Yes, big shout out to Green Apple.
Yes.
Thanks so much for organizing this fantastic event. And to all of you who are tuning in from around the world, welcome. Welcome to our little patch of the internet tonight. How are you doing, Shannon?
I'm doing all right. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to see you. I love Jeff Chang. He is awesome, as you will soon experience if you have not already experienced. And so thanks for being here with me to chat.
It's such an honor and a pleasure to be able to introduce you from the Bay Area where we're at here. And here in your pub week. And already, copies are flying out the door. I know that they've like pretty much sold out at Green Apple and everywhere that you've been, and deservedly so. It's a brilliant book. It's a beautiful book. Just reflecting who you are. And I'm wondering if you might bless us with a little bit of a reading to start.
Yes, of course. Thank you for your kind words. And I would love to share. I thought I would read this passage just from the very first chapter of the book. And it talks about, how my father sort of came into contact with and had his epiphany about the nature of water. So this section is called A Boy, a Kung Fu Master, and a Boat. My father began studying Wing Chun Kung Fu in Hong Kong at the age of 13. His sifu, or teacher, was a man by the name of Yip Man, also Ip Man. Yip Man was a very skillful teacher who not only drilled physical techniques, but also wove in Taoist philosophy and the principles of yin and yang into his lessons. He often illustrated his teachings through parables on nature, such as using the difference between an oak tree and bamboo to make a point. The oak tree will eventually snap under a strong wind, while the bamboo survives because it can move with the wind. My father was a dedicated student and a quick learner. He practiced outside of class whenever he could and became a star pupil. But he was also a teenager, a teenager whose childhood nickname had been Mo Siting, which translates to never sits still, and whose later nickname and stage name was Xiu Long, or Little Dragon. Born in the hour of the dragon and the year of the dragon, young Bruce Lee was all fire, all yang. And Yip Man was forever trying to teach this fiery teen the importance of gentleness, fluidity, and pliability, not just strength and cunning. To my father's credit, he would listen and try, but his eagerness and his temper would get the better of him. And besides, he'd wonder, isn't it better to win however you can? What does gentleness have to do with winning, really? One day, Yip Man was trying to teach young Bruce to relax and calm his mind, to forget about himself and follow his opponent's movements instead. Essentially, he was trying to get him to practice the art of detachment, to respond intuitively to an opponent rather than get caught up in only his own strategy, obsessively calculating his own punches and moves. When my father would get in his own way, visibly trapped in his own cleverness and combativeness, sweat dripping off his furrowed brow, Yip Man would step in again and again and tell him to conserve his energy by going with the natural bend of things. Never assert yourself against nature, he told him. Never be in frontal opposition to any problem, but control it by swinging with it. Finally, he stopped young Bruce and said, "Don't practice this week. Go home and think about what I've said." Don't practice this week? That was like telling my father not to breathe for a week. Banished from class, Bruce did continue to practice on his own, and he meditated and struggled in solitary contemplation to understand what his teacher was trying to say. Frustrated and with pent-up energy to spare, he decided one day to take a small boat out into Hong Kong harbor with his newly found and highly resented free time. He stopped rowing after a while and just lay in the boat, letting the waves take him. While he rocked along, he began to replay in his mind his teacher's urgings and all the time he had spent on training. What was he doing wrong? Why couldn't he understand what his teacher was saying? It didn't make any sense. His frustration spiked. In his fury, he leaned over and punched the South China Sea several times with all his might. Suddenly, a thought struck him, and he stopped and looked down at his wet hand. My father later wrote about it in this essay. Had not this water just now illustrated to me the principle of Gong Fu? I struck it, but it did not suffer hurt. Again, I struck it with all my might, yet it was not wounded. I then tried to grasp a handful of it, but this proved impossible. This water, the softest substance in the world which could be contained in the smallest jar, only seemed weak. In reality, it could penetrate the hardest substances in the world. That was it. I wanted to be like the nature of water. He had a second revelation as he watched a bird fly overhead and cast its reflection on the water in the very next moment. Should not the thoughts and emotions I have when in front of an opponent pass like the reflection of the bird flying over the water? This is exactly what Professor Yip meant by being one in whom feeling was not sticky or blocked. Therefore, in order to control myself, I must first accept myself by going with and not against my nature. And thus began my father's long and intimate relationship with water, an element that is soft yet strong, natural yet able to be directed, detached yet powerful, and above all, essential to life.
Ah, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for that. The book is called Be Water, My Friend, The Teachings of Bruce Lee. Shannon Lee is the author. And by the way, is there an audio book? Because that was just brilliantly read. I, you know, like I just wanted to close my eye. I can't close my eyes because obviously it would look like I was sleeping or something. But I just wanted to close my eyes and float away with you on that. That was amazing. Are you doing an
Oh,
audiobook on this?
there is an audiobook. Yes.
Oh, nice. That's
Yes,
good.
yes.
That's good. That's good. Fantastic. Well, so many things in that,
Yeah.
and here we are. It would have been fantastic if you and I were in the same place.
Yeah.
Um, we're here, in this pandemic. There's all kinds of things happening right now, and I just wonder, like, how do you describe sort of why your father's teachings are important for this moment? What can
Whew.
we learn in this particular moment? I know. Start with the questions.
Just jump right in there, Jeff.
Exactly.
Well,
Can't
look,
help it. Yeah.
I think there's so much in here, and really, um, I also could say that the Be Water quote of my father's, which is, "Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless like water. You put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put it into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. You put it in a bottle, it becomes the bottle. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend." And I say that, in part because there's so much to learn. And one of the things to learn is this notion of emptying the mind. Emptying the mind. Right now we're in isolation. And my father said, when you're in isolation, you are least alone, because you are in fact with yourself and your thoughts all the time. We're being bombarded by concerns and worries, and so much polarizing talk. And I think this notion of being formless, of being present to our circumstances, but at the same time, like being fluid, being responsive, holding an appropriate amount of tension and not too much tension, and being able to learn the art of detachment, to be able to assume whatever form we need to assume in the moment, to be able to stay centered within ourselves and not, be pulled in 1,000 different directions. This notion of a return to our essence, a return to our own soul, and to know ourselves and to work on actualizing ourselves, and the sense of friendship and harmony that can spread from that place. There are just so many different facets of his teachings that I think are sort of like a balm to the soul, but also, requires some practice and some vigilance on our part. And vigilance has been actually a really important idea to me lately, but not this vigilance that's like, waiting for something bad to happen or waiting for the other shoe to drop, but just an awareness, like remaining aware, being present to my circumstances, not getting too caught up in, all of the places my mind wants to like wander off into, and uh, retaining this formlessness, this ability to shapeshift and go where I need to go and when I need to go there.
Mm. So, like, sort of like a vigilance that's kind of maybe rooted in calm rather than fear. And sort of vigilance
Yeah,
you
like
describe.
like what he would say is, don't be tense but
Mm-hmm.
ready,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Not thinking, like not overthinking, but also not like dreaming and checked out, right? Just, quietly aware of your surroundings, what's going on, and in a relaxed sense, in a peaceful, centered way, not in a this kind of way, which I think everybody feels like this right now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Hey, it's a lot of young energy in the world right now. Just a lot of like, yeah,
Yes.
just a lot of young energy and a lot of sort of um, the opposite of what you're describing. It's really interesting because, in so many ways, the image of your father is
Mm.
as somebody who's going to get up and kick ass,
Yeah.
right? Sort of the sort of ultimate warrior, I guess, you know, to kind of
Yeah.
go back to the original idea, which we can talk about that and how it became a TV series and that kind of thing. But yeah, just sort of the ultimate warrior.
Yeah.
Um, and yet what you're describing is actually something that would kind of seem to counteract that stereotype, almost the opposite of it.
Yeah, but you can see it in him as well, because it's sort of one of these things where yes, he is the has the ability to, you know, kick ass and rain down a lot of action, but it's, even when you look at him, you see it stems from this like very confident, still place. It's almost like right before like a cat or a dog like lunges, sometimes they get like very quiet. And then they
Yeah,
just sort of like shoot forward,
yeah.
you know, from that place. But it's a an extreme sort of confidence and sense of self. Like I really can't overstate enough the importance of confidence, and not ego, like not like that, but just like faith in oneself, knowledge of oneself on which you can rely, you know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the form of the book, because this is what I think is so brilliant. There's, you know, a fair amount of books out about your father.
Mm.
Um, oh, why don't we shout out a couple too while we're at it? Yeah. Like I would love to shout out Charles Russo's book,
Yeah.
Striking Distance.
Striking
Charles
distance.
Russo, our local San Francisco super journalist who did an amazing book on Bruce's time, your father's time here in the Bay Area,
Yeah.
in Oakland, and San Francisco, and his escapades and you know, adventures in San Francisco. Um, and we should also shout out that your good friend, your father's good friend, Doug Palmer,
Oh
has a
yeah.
book that just dropped as well, right? Bruce Lee,
Yes.
my Sifu, my friend,
Hmm.
um, my Sifu, my mentor, my friend. But your book is really interesting to me, and it's beautifully written.
Thank
I
you.
love it. I love it to death. The series of essays, and you bring together so many things. I mean, there's something in here for everybody. There's something in here for the diehard Bruce Lee fan who is looking for things that haven't necessarily been revealed yet. Yeah, like
Mm.
you have a relationship and an access to him that no other person would, no other kind of biographer or
Mm.
a person from outside would. And there's also if you're a martial arts fan, there's a lot of talk about martial arts, and if you're a philosopher, there's a lot of stuff about that in there as well. And there's also, I think, what's really moving to me is there's
Mm.
you're doing sort of a memoiristic type of pieces as well. Like we get to know about you and your relationship to your, not just your father, but your brother,
Mhm.
and your mom, and your teachers as well. And I guess big lead up, just a very simple question. What made you think that you wanted to write about your father in this kind of a way? Because I know that you've done a lot of intros and
Yeah.
sort of, you know, different types of things, but this is like maybe your first really big extended kind of book, yeah, on this. What made you
It
decide
is.
to do this?
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is. Well, you know, I was never going to write a straight up biography. I'm not a, like a facts and dates kind of person. I'm working with his story and his life all the time. And I think I say even in the introduction of this book, which is, I'm not super precious about the material. I wanted to write this book because it has absolute meaning. The form of the book and the things that I share in this book have absolute meaning to me personally. And I feel like my father and I mean, look, I've studied martial arts, but I'm not a martial artist like him. He was like
Mm,
a martial artist, you know. He loved it. He dissected it. He studied it. You know, he lived it. Um, you know, and so he, but where we meet, where he and I meet, is in the philosophy. It's in the wanting to know ourselves. It's in the wanting to look within.
Mhm.
And his words have healed me over time.
Mm.
And I have grown over time. I mean, it's taken a minute, but matured and grown over time, and in big part due to trying to live into his words the way that he tried to live into these thoughts and principles as well. Yes, he approached them more through like a martial doorway, and I approached them more through just like a trying to live in this world and and my approach to life, that doorway. But it's where we meet, it's where we intersect. Yeah. And that's what's meaningful to me. And so it's like I wanted to tell the stories. I wanted to tell stories about him, but also to tell stories about me so that the reader could understand, with these like lessons of philosophy weaved in, could understand that these things work, that they have power.
Mm.
Yeah.
Shannon, I don't know how to ask this actually, so I'm just going to try.
Okay.
But the one of the most moving parts of the book for me was in you describing your relationship to your brother,
Mm-hmm.
and both your father and your brother passed way too soon,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm wondering what was that like, trying to put that down, trying to document that. Did you have
Yeah.
any worries about, I don't know, about sort of approaching that particular subject? Can't imagine it was easy.
Yeah, no, I mean, even though crazily enough, it's been 27 years since
Mhm.
I lost my brother, which is, I can't even imagine. Um, he was 28 when he died. So next year it'll be like I've been without him, as longer. Uh, but I, I really just in this book, period. And so whether it was, the more prescriptive sort of philosophical stuff, or whether it was this more personal stuff, I just was really trying, as my father would say, to honestly express myself.
Mhm.
And and the truth of the matter is that my father's writings really came to me, and I really started to delve into them after my brother died. And it was these writings that saved me in a way, because I was really suffering. I was really suffering, and it was this thing that was it's this thing, and this is why, like, in some ways, like, I just always want to try so much to approach others in the world with compassion, because on the outside, if you had met me at that time, I was trying to have an acting career. I was married. I was, like, going to parties and hanging out with friends. Like, what you saw on the outside was, looked fine. It looked normal. It looked like I was great. But on the inside, I was in so much pain every single day. And I didn't know how to live. I didn't know how to go on living, honestly.
Mhm.
Not that there was ever a thought to not go on living. I just didn't know how I was supposed. I'm like, okay, I'm in my 20s. I'm supposed to live like this for the next, what, 60 something years? Like, this is crazy. I'm not gonna make it. And so, as hard as it was to write about it, and even when I read that chapter in the audiobook, it was hard to it was hard to get through. I'm not gonna lie. Um, I I I know there are many people who know this feeling, and And especially right now, I mean, there have been so many people who've died who've lost loved ones, you know, during the pandemic and all of this. And I just wanted to share as best I could, you know, honestly, what that place was for me and how, you know, and then again too, like my brother's death and the suddenness of it and the trauma of it awakened a whole sense of trauma that I had had going back to when my father died when I was 4, that I wasn't even conscious of. And to say that, you know, I've been in dark places where I literally didn't understand how the world was still operating and functioning and how I was supposed to do that. And that, you know, there's a thing in the book where my father's, one of his quotes is, you know, everybody wants to learn the way to win, but nobody wants to learn how to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
it's like we all lose, you know, maybe not something big like that, but we all have losses in life. And nobody, and they're hard to deal with, but we have to deal with them in order to heal through them and move through them.
Mm-hmm. That's
Yeah.
real. That's real talk.
Yeah.
Um, one thing to the audience, if you have questions for Shannon, please go ahead and add them to that little button on the bottom. It says Q&A. You can add your questions in there, and Cara is going to join us in a few minutes to be able to read some of those questions to Shannon for your answers, Shannon, to the amazing audience out there. Let's shift gears. Let's talk a little
Okay.
bit about, you know, it's interesting because it feels like in the last, you know, year or so, there's been, you've steadily been at it. You've been building this for years, but it feels like there's, you know, a lot of attention
Mm-hmm.
being paid now. Again, it seems, you know, generational. Every generation kind of has this Bruce Lee moment. We talked a little bit
Yeah.
more earlier about why, you know, your father matters right now. But let's just talk about all the things that you got going. I mean, the podcast, which has
Yes.
been going strong. You've got like 100, what, 150, like
It's
something
139 episodes, and then we took a big break, and actually we're getting ready to come back with new episodes. Yeah.
in a couple of weeks. Yeah, you got a new one
Yeah.
coming, right?
October 15th is the beginning of the next season. So
Good day. That's
yeah.
my father's birthday.
Hey, all
Yeah,
right.
my late father's birthday. Um, and so you got that, and Warrior is back. Tell us a little bit about that for folks who don't know. It's an amazing
Yeah.
TV series on HBO Cinemax, and it's launching its second season. So if you've been missing out, you've been missing out. Um, but tell us about Warrior, how it came about, what you got in store for the new season, what's going on.
Yeah, so the second season debuted just last Friday. Actually, the second episode is on tonight at 10 p.m. And it's on Cinemax. And this show, I mean, it's been absolutely a thrilling um, um, project for me to be able to bring this to fruition because, you know, my father created the treatment for this TV series back 50 years ago. So, and he pitched it to Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers, you know, was talking to him about it, and they wanted him to star in something. And then the final word came down, which was, I'm sorry, but we just don't think American audiences will buy a Chinese leading man. And, you know, you have kind of a weird accent, and, you know, so we just don't think it's going to fly. And they ended up making Kung Fu, the TV series, which they had been wanting my father to star in, with a white actor instead. So, and so it was very disappointing for my father, and he was on a real drive to have there be a portrayal in Hollywood of an authentic Asian man. And he was hoping this project was going to do it, but it was turned down. It was rejected. And it sat in a box for years and years and years. And I always knew the history of this story, but it wasn't until my mom sent all of his things to me about 20 years ago, when I first started looking after my father's legacy, that I came across it. And I was like, oh my gosh, here it is. Here's this thing. But at that time I was just finishing up, winding down an acting career. I had never produced a thing. I didn't know anybody in Hollywood really. So I just sort of put it back in the box and thought, well, maybe one day there'd be something I could do with that. And then cut to about 6 years ago, Justin Lin, who I had met a couple of times in different places, called me up and said, I've always heard this story about this treatment that your father wrote that got rejected, and that he wasn't cast for any shows. And is that a true story? And I said, yeah, it's a true story. And he said, you wouldn't happen to know where that treatment is, would you? And I said, yeah, actually, I have it right here. And so he asked if he could see it, and I brought it to him. And here's the thing. I mean, I was so grateful for Justin, because without Justin, this really doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen in the phenomenal way that it has happened, because the show is so good. But he said to me, we should make this, but we should only make this if we feel like we can honor your father in the way we make it. And if we can only really do it the story justice. And so, quite frankly, I feel like, the show takes place in 19th century San Francisco, Chinatown, and it takes place at Chinatown. It takes place in right in the period of time as the Tang Wars are taking place in Chinatown historically, and also right before the Chinese Exclusion Act is enacted. And so it is this stew of, warring factions in Chinatown, the police on one side, the Irish labor workers on another, the politicians on another, and, and this martial artist who wanders into the fray, of all of that. And so even though it's this like action-packed, awesome martial arts drama, it's a significant show. It really tells an important story and highlights an important period in time of America. It's an American story. Mm-hmm. And it's got an awesomely big Asian cast who are amazing.
They're amazing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So everybody knows where to go after we're done here with this interview tonight.
Cinemats.
Yeah, Cara, I think we're ready for some questions.
Excellent. So am I. Thank you both so much. This is fantastic already. I love hearing both of you. Jeff, thank you for your question. Shannon, thank you for your very considered answers. I'd love to get to some questions here. Oh, I had them in order. Adrian asks, we who knew Bruce understand and appreciate his work. What would someone who just found out about him and his life learn from your book?
Ooh, that's a great question. Thank you, Adrian. One of the things I really wanted to express in this book is how much of a deep thinker and philosopher my father really was. I mean, everybody knows the Bruce Lee, the action hero, the martial artist. They have that picture in their mind, but they don't understand that the reason he's so captivating on screen is because there is this foundation of deep personal work that he was engaged in, and that he was a real, like, honest to God philosopher, not just like, he didn't just have like a few cool quotes, like he was deeply read. I have all of his books, like over 1,000 books, annotated, underlined. He wrote pages and pages of essays and thoughts and process and all of that. And so I really want people to understand like how dedicated he was to the cultivation of his being. And that is where we can all have something in common with him.
Mm-hmm.
Another question here comes from Andrew. Andrew actually says something nice and then asks a question. Not so much a question, but a statement. Truly moved by your reading and your honest sharing of your life philosophy and how it connects with your father. Truly beautiful and inspiring. And
Thank you.
also asks, what are your daily rituals for centering yourself?
Ooh, good one. I have been engaging in quite a bit of meditation lately. When I start to feel myself, I can feel my body and my mind getting gunked up, and really, it can be anything from, some brain fog to fatigue to like stiff body, and so I think getting outside and going for a walk, getting in touch with, nature, whether that's just like fresh air or whether that's sunshine or whether that's grass, is, I think all of that is very like a bit of a reset. But I've been also engaging in a lot of meditation, and literally 5 minutes of meditation. And I mentioned this in the book, that the empty your mind, be formless, shapeless like water quote, to me, even it has such like a soothing quality to me. And when I think about like my brain, my skull as like a sacred bowl, and I literally sort of just close my mind and try to empty out all of the thoughts, all of the clutter. And I also just try to loosen my body. Like, to me, meditation a lot of times is just about stopping this from happening and doing this and allowing myself to just like relax inwardly, like from the inside out, and wash my thoughts out and wash and breathe.
I think your camera may have frozen on us, Shannon, but it's actually very fitting because you look very meditative right now.
She really does. Oh no.
Um,
Zoom events.
I know it always happens, but I trust that it will come back. And if you can still hear us, I'll ask you another question. Um, Anthony says this conversation is so moving. Could Shannon please share some details of Bruce's struggles as he tried to make it in Hollywood? Beautiful.
Hey, there she
Perfect.
is. We're just saying it's the Zoom age. You're on mute, by the way, Shannon. Yep.
Perfect.
Okay, there we go.
You were literally like, you're like, that's sort of how you looked when you froze. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It was
Don't
like
freeze again. Oh my gosh. That was close. That was close.
Yeah, well, I don't know where you left off, but anyway, just trying to relax inwardly, and like that gripping sense that we all feel internally, and just to try to relax that and literally empty my mind, and allow that flow to start happening again internally, has been really invaluable through meditation, then also just through moving my body a little bit, and being sure to have a mix of something that's enjoyable,
Mm.
during the day, whatever that is, and connection with other humans is pretty good too.
Agreed. Anthony says, this conversation is so moving. Could Shannon please share some details of Bruce's struggle as he tried to make it in Hollywood? I've heard of the rejections, minimized roles, etc., but what was it like on a day-to-day basis at home? What helped him push through despite these repeated setbacks? I think this would really help those who are facing day-to-day challenges today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, look, it was so, he was discovered, and at the Long Beach International Karate Tournament. That's how he got called in for an audition and a screen test, and how he got the part as Kato. Once he got the part of Kato on the Green Hornet, they were really concerned. You know, he was a quote nobody, and they sent him to acting class. And so he went to acting class, which, by the way, he was in 20 movies as a child. So he was a child star, but they didn't know that, and they didn't know him. They sent him to acting class, and then they started filming the show. And after a couple of episodes, he reached out to the producers and said, you know, you're sending me to acting class, but I don't have any lines. So there's nothing for me to act, for me to say. Like, you know, he had to constantly advocate for himself, I guess, is the point that I'm trying to make. And, you know, it was a bit of a boon when he got that part, and it was more money than my parents had ever seen in their lives. And but that show was canceled after one season. And then he was just in the washing machine of Hollywood trying to get parts, and he refused to take parts that were degrading to him, or to, you know, Asians culturally or anything like that. And so now there's even less parts. So how did he keep going? I mean, here's the thing. He had faith in himself. He knew, and I really think that this is in part very much due to his martial arts practice. Because I know for me, in my study of martial arts, one of the things that it has done for me has given me inner strength, you know, ability to stand, you know, like when you have an ability to stand in front of an opponent and have, you know, punches and kicks flying at you, and have to learn how to respond appropriately and stay on your feet and move and, you know, be like water, right? Like, it develops in you a certain amount of confidence and a certain amount of personal reliability and self-sufficiency. And so I think that he had that, and he also knew how hard he was willing to work. So he had an incredible work ethic, and he wasn't gonna, you know, and he had like 1,000 irons in the fire. So he was teaching and making money teaching. He was auditioning. He was teaching classes and privately teaching. He was also trying to develop his own projects. He was like, the project that I would really like to star in doesn't exist. So I'm going to need to create that. And he had friends in Hollywood. You know, James Coburn was a friend. Steve McQueen was a friend. Ted Ashley, the head of Warner Brothers, was a friend. And so he was constantly trying to say, you know, what can we do? What can we do? Could I pitch something? What do you think? But he was up against a massive system that had a lot of prejudice, and it was very hard for him. And you know, and I cover this time in the book too. And then he injured his back very seriously, and he couldn't work, and he had to be on bed rest for months. And so my mom had to get a job, and my parents ultimately couldn't afford to keep their house, you know, and so times were tough. But the thing is that he was not a person who believed in sort of like resting and on his laurels or waiting to see. It's kind of this interesting, this is why yin and yang are so interesting, right? Because it is this interplay of soft and hard, and so sometimes you need to push, but sometimes you need to relax as well. And for him, like, he had this poster, which I love. It's also in the book, but he had this poster, which is in my office. And it's this like 70s, like crazy 70s colors, cartoon drawing of these two vultures sitting on a dead tree branch overlooking this barren landscape. And there's like a cow skull on the ground. And it says, the poster says, "Patience my ass, I'm going to kill something." And I just think that is so my father. Like yes, it was like he wouldn't bang his head against a wall for very long. he would learn how to flow and go around and move and shift and change perspective and try something else. When he injured his back, he had to recalibrate all over again. He had to heal himself. He had to do all this stuff, but he also was never going to stop. He was just going to keep going and keep going. You know, in the book, I talk about the eightfold path. And one of the things is to keep going at the staying speed. You don't have to be the fastest. You don't have to be, and it doesn't matter if you're slow. If you're at the staying speed, then you keep going. You just keep going. So.
Thanks so much. Car, I think we have time for one more question, and then we want to close this out with a little maybe gift from Shannon that I'm going to ask her to give us. Give us a gift, Shannon. Go ahead, Car, please. Last question here.
Sure thing. You know, I had it. Where did it go? Oh, yeah. And thank you all for your very generous questions, and there are so many, we can't answer them all, but I really appreciate you all submitting and taking the time to do that and to be here with us tonight. And thank you to Shannon for taking the time to answer them. So this last question comes from Camille. Your father was able to open his teachings to all folks, brown and black peoples too. What do you think your father could say about what's going on in this country right now? The hate and discrimination that Asian and brown and black folks are still dealing with today?
Yeah, you know, I mean, this was a big theme in my father's life, which is he just he really believed, and I'm sure you've probably heard the quote before, but that under the sky there is but one family. That we are, you know, I call it like the human first policy. And I think he experienced a lot of prejudice, and a lot of racism, and a lot of people, you know, personal and systemic, and a lot of people just treating other people a certain way based on nothing of substance, you know. And I just don't think he understood it. He didn't like being treated that way, and so he was not going to treat anyone that way. And so I think he would be, you know, Jeff Chang actually has a great quote in the documentary, the ESPN 30 for 30, that just came out recently, called Be Water, also sensing a theme. And he said, you know, Bruce Lee's very appearance on screen was a protest. And, you know, I gave a talk last year, and one of the things I talked about, and I cover a similar, not in exactly the same way I did it in the talk, but I talk about his phrase, "It hits all by itself." And to me, that idea of like him just showing up is a protest, is the same to me as "it hits all by itself." It's like he was not gonna make himself small. He was going to keep going. And yes, he was going to keep getting, you know, smacked to the side and treated a certain way and marginalized and told no. But by him just continuing to show up and continuing to cultivate himself and show up as his cultivated self in these spaces was in and of itself a protest. And it was him just sort of hitting all by himself, just like he didn't have to hit, he was hitting, he was just, because he was there, you know. And so, you know, I mean, what can I say? I think he would be very disappointed by the way we treat one another. He didn't believe in treating people, you know, marginalizing people, and he did believe in having solidarity with people, standing in solidarity, and I think he would be doing that, and I think he would be trying to advocate I talk in the book a bit about the competition model. And my father, even though he's a martial artist, he did not believe in competition. He didn't participate in competitions. And he said, competition is not a good model for growth. And um, and I feel like, when all we care about is competing, all we care about is winning. First of all, if there's winners, that means there has to be losers. And if all we care about is winning, then we're going to do whatever we can to rig the game in our favor. And we're not caring about the humans. And so, anyway, I think those would be his thoughts. I think he would be sorely disappointed, and I think he would be trying to show up in all the spaces he could show up to, be the change that he would like to see.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to leave you folks the stage for the rest of our hour here. So thank you from Green Apple.
Thank you, Car.
Thank you so much, Cara. Thank you, Camille, for that amazing question. And thank you to
Thank
all of
you.
you who, for your beautiful thoughts and your awesome questions. I just, maybe just another shout out to Bao Nguyen, the director
Yeah.
of Be Water, who I've been lucky enough to collaborate on 2 projects now back to back with him. But one of the things that came up for me as I was uh, getting a chance to watch all of the things, was all of the sort of drafts of the movie, was hearing your voice, reading your father's words, and thinking about and it's reinforced for me tonight too, and also it was for me in reading your book, is thinking about the idea of Bruce's martial thoughts, so to speak, right? Just the word martial, it's like you're going to war or that kind of thing. But his martial thoughts are really, and you've made this clear through all of your work on the podcast and all these other things that you've been able to do to continue his legacy, is that these are thoughts about life. These are thoughts about how to best live life, and to actually be in community with others. It's not about pounding the other person to death, right? We have a lot of examples of that right now in the world, and so reading your book, I think in this particular moment, for me, was powerful, and it was really healing. And I just wanted to thank you for that. And I wondered if you might bless us actually, and close us out, having the last word with reading another excerpt of your book.
Oh, thank you. It would be a joy for me to read an excerpt from my book. And I just want to say before I do that, Jeff, as I said at the opening, I mean, I have so much love for you, but I also just want to reflect for everybody, like what a model of generosity you are also, like the way in which you want to give shout outs, you want to give acknowledgments to all these other people and all these other artists putting their good works out in the world, just like you are as well. And that, when we're not in competition, we're in collaboration. We want to raise each other up, and so I just wanted to say thank you for being an awesome human. All right, so I'm going to read, this is a little bit of a long section, but I'm going to read this section. It's called, as Jeff alluded to, it has to do a little bit with martial arts. It's called Bridging the Gap. In martial arts, there is a concept known as bridging the gap. The gap, most simply, is the space between you and your target or opponent. Whoever can bridge this gap most efficiently and effectively without getting caught in harm's way themselves is the one with the higher skill or the best kung fu. In martial arts, there are many tools you must have in your kit to do this well. You must have great mobility, quick footwork that can move in any direction. You must have a great sensitivity, being able to read your opponent and his movements by being fully present and responsive to the slightest changes in condition. You must have a great sense of timing, being able to find the perfect pockets of ingress that you can easily slip into. You must have great understanding, an ability to bring all your experience to bear. And you must have great spontaneity, being able to move at a moment's notice without telegraphing your movement ahead of time. It should be a seamless interplay of presence and movement. As my father said, in order to achieve oneness of movement and true flow, the gap between movements should be bridged. But how do we apply this to life? What gap are we trying to bridge there? In martial arts, we are trying to bridge the gap that exists between us and our targets. And in life, that means everything that we interact with, such as our goals, our dreams, our relationships, and our work. We want to bring the same martial arts tools to bear on our gap-bridging life. We want to cultivate the skill of mobility, being able to come at a problem and move through life immediately and from a variety of angles. We want the skill of sensitivity, being able to sense what is called for in any situation by understanding what is happening and knowing how we feel and what we want. We want the skill of timing, being able not just to lead, but to be led to the best moments for our impetus. We want the skill of understanding, having looked at and learned from our past experiences so that we can bring what wisdom we have attained to the situation. And we want the skill of spontaneity, being able to act in our best interest with full naturalness and immediacy without being bogged down by too much thought. Notice that the gap is the place of emptiness. It is, in truth, the birthplace of reality. It is the moment, however small, in which a choice is made. In this tiny gap lies the moment of decision, of action, of reflex, of thought. This empty gap is the place where consciousness and unconsciousness meet. For sometimes we make a conscious choice in that gap, and sometimes we react unconsciously, spurred on by our subconscious conditioning and our training. Oftentimes, our choices are influenced by how much time we perceive we have to choose a path. A lot of time, and we can be more deliberate and conscious. No time, and we may act subconsciously. But the more we practice choosing quickly, and the more we practice conditioning our subconscious, the smaller the gap becomes, regardless of how much time we may be given. We learn to act from a place of cultivated instinct. So imagine, if you will, that you can be in total concert with this gap, no matter how tiny. You could consciously choose your response with ease and confidence, or you could condition your subconscious mind with so much nutritious, positive practice that when you responded unconsciously, the response was still a perfect expression made with ease and confidence. What if this gap could become so tiny that it seemed to disappear altogether? That seamlessness is the feeling of true flow, where we are moving within the oneness. As Bruce Lee reminds us, all movements come out of emptiness. The mind is the name given to this dynamic aspect of emptiness, and emptiness is sincerity. So there is no crookedness, no ego-centered motivation, only genuineness and straightforwardness, which allows nothing between itself and its movements. We want to practice bridging the gap between sensing and doing. I say sensing rather than thinking because traditionally, to think implies the analytical mind does not include intuition, instinct, feeling, and the subconscious. Up to this point, we have been discussing how to develop the whole body as the sensing instrument to work in lockstep with the mind. And now we are looking at how to shorten the response time between sensing and doing, such that thought and action become the oneness of expression. What we are aiming for is for there to be no dislocation in the movements. They are done with flowing continuity like the movement of a river that is forever flowing without a moment of cessation or standing still. How do we do this? Well, this is where the instruction manual needs to be written by you. Through all of your practice and discovery, you have started to develop a sense of what works best for you. My father said, "Perception is the way of truth." But this is not a perception that anyone can give to you. It is a perception that you must uncover for yourself. It comes from effortless and pliable awareness upon which you can act immediately because you have done the work to know yourself intimately and because you are willing to fully live and stand by your actions. My father said, "Freedom is something that cannot be preconceived. To realize freedom requires an alert mind, a mind that is deep with energy, a mind that is capable of immediate perception without the process of graduation, without the idea of an end to be slowly achieved." At this point, many would ask, how then do we gain this unlimited freedom? I cannot tell you because it will then become an approach. Although I can tell you what it is not, I cannot tell you what it is. That, my friend, you will have to find out all by yourself.
Beautiful. Mic dropped. Thank you so much, Shannon. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Big, big love to Green Apple Books. If you haven't bought the book, there are a couple copies of the autograph version left, and you need to get it from your independent bookstore, Green Apple Books on the Park, or Green Apple Books, period. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Green Apple. Thank you, everyone who attended tonight. It's absolutely my privilege to be here.
Yes. Car, do you have anything that you want to let folks know about?
No, that was perfect. Thank you. And Green Apple is big fans of both Shannon Lee and Jeff Chang. So
thank you. Thank you. All right.
Have a good evening. Tune into Warrior.
Yep. Have a good night, everyone. All right. Thanks.